Hey guys, Morgan the Rebellious Reviewer. We talk about music and occasionally books and movies. And today, we're gonna be talking about 10 albums that the king of the zodiac signs, Leo, should listen to. Before we get started, let me get a few rules out of the way. 1. These albums are in no particular order. This isn't a countdown. 2. These aren't albums that I think every single Leo will like. These are just albums that I feel fit Leo's personality traits. In other words, don't take it too seriously. Remember that your musical taste is not determined by your zodiac sign, okay? With that out of the way, let's get started with an album that fits Leo's symbol, which is the lion. When I think of a lion, I think of regalness, grandness, majesticness, however you want to say it. And when I think of those qualities, I think of power metal. There are plenty of power metal albums that could fit for this, but how about I take it a step further and include a power metal album about the King of Kings, Long Live the King by Narnia.
Long live the king. I wanna live, wanna fight, 'cause in the end we will win.
Looking at this album cover, you might think I chose this album solely because it has a picture of a lion on the cover and the band is called Narnia. That is part of it, but it doesn't tell the whole story. I also put it on here because this album is by a Christian power metal band. Unlike some Christian metal bands, these guys don't try to make their lyrics apply to anything. Their lyrics are so on the nose that they might as well just be contemporary Christian songs that happen to have power metal instrumentation. I know that sounds like an insult, but the instrumentation is quite grand and big, which also fits Leo, by the way. If you're wondering what any of this has to do with Leo, aside from the thing about the instrumentation, it's because, according to Christians, Jesus is the King of Kings. So you can't really get much more regal than that, and therefore more lion-like. If you're a Leo and you're religious, this is your album. And now we move on to an album that fits with Leo's element, which is fire. When I think of fire, I think of passion, energy, and aggression. An album that fits with that is The Crusade by Trivium. Yes, I know that Trivium have an album called Ember to Inferno, which actually has fire on the cover, but screw it, I prefer The Crusade. This album perfectly embodies the good and bad sides of fire. On one hand, you have songs about banding together to fight for a cause, which showcases the passionate side of fire. On the other hand, you have a bunch of songs about murder, which fit the aggressive side of fire. Another thing that made me pick this album instead of Ember to Inferno is the song anthem, We Are the Fire. This song is not only everything that I associate with fire, it also has fire in the title. This album is fire personified, and I love it. Now on to an album that fits Leo's quality, which is fixed. Fixed means that Leos are stubborn and set in their ways. So, how about an album that's part of a series that went on for years? Symphony of Enchanted Lands by Rhapsody of Fire. second album in the Emerald Sword Saga. The Emerald Sword Saga is a series of epic fantasy themed albums, all with the same concept, created by Rhapsody of Fire. This series started with their debut album, Legendary Tales, before continuing all the way up to their fifth album, Power of the Dragon Flame. With that in mind, the reason I'm picking their second album is because if one were to only check out one album from this series, I would say it should be this one, but in all honesty, all 5 of the albums should be checked out. What makes this fit with Fixed is that it's a 5-part series of albums that all have kind of a similar sound and, of course, the same topic. If you don't like change, this is perfect for you. And there's also just enough variation to keep it from being boring. It also fits Leo because it's so majestic sounding. Seriously, these instrumentals make me feel like I'm the best person on Earth. In other words, exactly what Leo wants. Congratulations, Leos. You guys get 14 albums for the price of 10. I hope you enjoy them. Now on to the albums that fit Leo's personality traits. The first of these is Generosity. So, how about we have an album that advocates for sharing just about everything, including the means of production. Entertainment by Gang of Four.
It's not played by great men. It's not played by great men.
Now, before you get all up in arms, let me make it clear that you don't have to be a socialist in order to be generous. However, socialism is a generous ideology, at least in theory, if not in practice. Gang of Four, for those of you who don't know, are a communist post-punk band. If there are any leftist Leos out there, this is the album for you. It also fits Leo because, in addition to the left-wing political commentary songs, there are also some love and sex songs on this album, which fit quite nicely with the pleasure-seeking side of Leo. It's also a lot of fun musically, being extremely danceable. Speaking of fun albums, the next album is about self-confidence, and it is Into the Wildlife by Hailstorm. Hailstorm are basically the ultimate Leo band. Not only is their music a ton of fun to listen to, but they also have a ton of confidence and swagger. Vocalist Lizzie Hale is extremely charismatic, much like Leos themselves. And this album is also full of self-esteem anthems that I think Leos will relate to. Most notably, Amen and I Am the Fire. I would say more, but honestly, it's Hailstorm. I've talked about them enough as it is. On to the next trait, which is Determination. An album that fits that is 9 by Circus Maximus. By Circus Maximus may be the single most uplifting album I've ever listened to. It's full of songs about persevering through tough times, most notably the song Game of Life. This album contains the oh-so-beautiful lines, "There's no success without will, what you gain ain't free in life, it isn't where you come from, it's where you're going that counts, get back into the saddle again, ride alongside life's reign, and walk out as the winner when you own the game. If that doesn't sum up determination, I don't know what does. This album also fits Leo because of how majestic it sounds. It has these beautiful melodic keyboards and guitars that just sound so epic. And speaking of epic sounding melodic metal albums, this next album represents leadership, and it is Dragon Slayer by Dream Evil. Another power metal album that will make the listener feel like a king. This one's about slaying dragons, surprise, surprise. It fits leadership because in the song In Flames You Will Burn, the singer talks about leading his knights into battle. Also, there's a song on here called HMJ, which stands for Heavy Metal Jesus. In other words, these guys don't just consider themselves the kings of heavy metal, they consider themselves the king of the kings of heavy metal. Also, this album once again sounds majestic. In fact, I'm just gonna say it. Check out the entire genres of power metal, progressive metal, symphonic metal, and folk metal. Those genres all sound grand. That's your homework for this video, Leos. Check out these genres. Anyway, that's the last positive trait I'll be talking about for Leo. Now we'll move on to the negative traits. In other words, if you can't take criticism, click off this video. If you can take criticism, however, stick around because the next trait is arrogant, and an album for that one is 24 Karat Magic by Bruno Mars. This album is egotism personified. Even the love songs on it are pretty self-centered. Looking at you, that's what I like. If a Leo got enough money, this is how I imagine they would act. Arrogant, but not exclusive. On top of that, the album is just a lot of fun. Again, the fun side of Leo is showing. I know I complain about flexing a lot, but this album does it right. Anyway, the next trait is stubborn. And an album that fits that is Dear Agony by Breaking Benjamin. Are a great band. That said, they have a formula and they're sticking to it. You could even say that they're stubborn about not changing up their sound. Also, the song I Will Not Bow is both stubborn and determined at the same time, making it the perfect Leo song. That's all I really have to say about this one. So let's move on to the final trait, which is can't take criticism. An album that fits with can't take criticism is Kamikaze by Eminem.
Give me some room, give me some room, give me the juice. How about the coupe? How about the coupe? How about the shoot? Y'all gotta move, y'all gotta move. Give me the juice.
Before I get started, let me just say that this is kind of hilarious to me that the final trait is can't take criticism, when I specifically said that if you can't take criticism, you should click off this video. In other words, no one's probably gonna watch the second half of this video. Anyway, as much as I like Eminem, I have to admit it. This guy cannot take criticism. Even in his early days when he was amazing and everyone loved him, he could not take criticism. He had a bad habit of picking fights with people who criticized him, and a lot of times it was really petty. Granted, his fan base is even worse, but still. The reason I picked this album in particular, instead of a different Eminem album, is that this album is basically a response to critics and audience who didn't like his previous album, Revival. AKA the album that contains the classic line, "Your booty is heavy duty like diarrhea," on an album that's supposed to be making a serious political statement. If you can't take criticism for that, you officially can't take criticism. This album is also fitting for Leo because it has a lot of bragging. In fact, rap is another genre that fits really well with Leo just because it has so much bragging in it. It's arrogant, it's self-confident, need I say more? And that's my list. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. I'm Morgan the Rebellious Reviewer, and I'm out.